Hi, welcome everyone. We'll be getting started in a few minutes.
Well, hopefully Rocky makes an appearance. Chihuahua. We'll see.
Awesome. I hope so.
He opens that door. I'm totally gonna let him sit on my lap and say hi.
Yeah. Welcome to everyone joining us, and we'll see if we get a guest star today during our
Right.
presentation. I'm just going to give folks one more minute to come in, and then we'll get started. All right, I have 10 a.m., so in the interest of maximizing our time with our presenter today, I'm going to get this show on the road. Hi, I'm Elle Schofield. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm happy to welcome you to this Tech Connect session. I'm going to let our presenter introduce himself in just a second, but just to let you know, I'll be managing the chat today, so if at any point you have questions for our presenter, please feel free to enter them into the chat window, and I'll be happy to bring them up at an appropriate moment in the presentation so that Jesse can respond. And with that, anything else that I should share before we get started?
Sounds good. Thanks, Al.
Okay,
Appreciate
yeah,
it. Yeah.
go ahead.
Great. Hi, I'm Jesse Moore. My pronouns are he, him, and I will be talking about detecting bad things on Windows. So thanks for everyone for showing up on this bright sunny day for this presentation. This will hopefully be a good range for managers to be able to be like, oh, I'm aware of this now. I can tell admins, I can ask questions about things to the admin. And for admins, they can go ahead and be like, oh, I did not know that before. That might be interesting. And then maybe all those questions would just go to the CISO's office at UW-IT, and then we could talk about those in depth. So let me go into the next slide, which is I will be showing some tactics and techniques, some basically things that the bad people will do on the keyboard. Please don't use these for evil. This is to be for educational purposes and hopefully to help you detect that evilness. So Who is this guy? Who's this guy? That guy is Rocky. He's my Chihuahua. Love him. So I'm a proud pet parent. I'm also the family's personal tech. So whenever there's a personal problem, they call me up and we go through that. So that's a lot of fun, being the personal tech in the family. And I used to be an admin over at Nintendo, and there's a lot of things that was not passed on to me as an admin that I would have loved to know for security. So I'm hoping to pass that kind of stuff on to you folks. And so, of course, I have to say, well, how do I know? I have all this education, master's degree, master's degree, I think 2 associates, tons of certifications, whatever, what have you. But you can see all that stuff if you want. Check it out on LinkedIn. You have any questions, feel free to give me a call or an email, and we can connect on more things about that. I'd love to talk. I love talking security. That's my passion. So yeah, it never bothers me, and I'm super into it. So please connect with that. Some more information about me. So like, what have I been up to? What have I been doing with the community? Not only just at work, but like in the community. So there's this thing called WRCCDC. Well, what's that, right? Well, it's Western Regional Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition. Like, okay, what is that? All right, so it's part of this huge thing across the whole United States. A bunch of colleges participate in this competition for defending basically mini businesses is what they make. And so they're separated into regions, almost like you can think of it as like football, and they have playoffs in different regions that compete against each other, and it culminates in like a final Super Bowl, right? And the same thing is with this. It'll culminate into a couple teams getting together, doing battle. In that, it's to kind of visualize it, it's a bunch of students in these different locations. Let me pull this out real quick. So this is actually a YouTube video of a region, PRCCDC, and it's a room, and in the room they have pictures, they have these tables, and each table actually is a team, and the team is guarding their own mini business. That's like Exchange, web servers, you name it, right? And so the thing is another room with tables just like this has, well, here it is actually right here. So this table right here, this is the red team. So all of these groups are actually attacking the other group of people in these competitions. It's pretty neat. It's pretty fun. So let me back to the slide for you. And so yeah, so that's CCDC. That's what I do on my off time passion. Last year, I actually was on the ops team, so I built those mini businesses. So I feel your frustration, admins, when trying to keep things up and going. It's great. Some things I played with while I was there. Ansible, did some automation there. Really cool things with automation these days. And that's kind of what we'll be talking to a little bit later about this, detecting bad things. We'll be using some automation for the red team side of things, not just on the admin side where you can build out things, but on the other side. Yeah, so let's go ahead and define some bad things. So criminals, right? Looking for money. Common thing nowadays on the news media, it's ransomware. An example here is like a phone app. Like you'll go to like a website or something on your phone. It's like, hey, go here and download this app. You're like, oh, okay. Problem here is when you do that, you don't go to trusted things like maybe the iPhone store or like Google store or something like that, then you have these malicious people that have these malicious things that try to do bad things. Not good. So there's those people, there's nation states, but what does that mean? Basically, the US is a nation, so we have like Canada and Germany and all these different nations, and they all have their own security people hacking into things. And they're just trying to, for the most part, monetize anything. It could be intellectual property. It could be like, I want money to fund some strategy that we're doing in the country, something like that. You can go to the FBI Most Wanted and they'll show actually some of the groups. They make these names up like APT, Advanced Persistent Threat. I don't know that a lot of it's advanced. I think a lot of it's like, you don't know what you don't know, but once you know it, you're like, that's not that advance. But anyways, so yeah, those are nation states. They're different countries, and they got just the people that are just work. That's all they do. They work. They come into the office. They clock in. They do the stuff uh, through that kind of stuff. And then there's all sorts of bad things, right? There's also the scammers. That probably affects you a lot at home. Being a personal tech, it affects my home and relatives and family with like gift card scams. Like my relatives, my grandparents, they went ahead and they got basically hijacked, account taken over, their stuff. They had an email sent to friends and family that said, hey, whole story. And then it was basically like, hey, send me a gift card, an Amazon gift card. And unfortunately, the relatives, friends fell for it. And so I actually send an email every year saying, please send this email out to all your friends, say that you'll never ask for money from them. It gets a little funky with like charities and stuff. Some charities you kind of have to do stuff through email or online, but you should probably like call or something. Anyways, so that's another bad thing. So these are bad things. This is not all bad things, but these are some bad things. What are they looking for? Pretty much, again, anything to monetize, but you, right? They're looking for your email. They want your username. For instance, maybe they want to get into your net ID, right? And they're like, oh, cool, net ID. Now I can get into their OneDrive. Now I can get into their Google Drive. I can take all that information. I can, do all sorts of interesting things now that I have resources from UW. Financial is huge, obviously, with ransomware. So that's kind of the defining the bad things. I'd like to go into an example, though, of a bad thing specifically, and we'll talk about what's been in the news. So that's like ransomware, right? So over here, let's see, let me get my thing out here. So that's over here is like SolarWinds. You had Microsoft Exchange. You had like the pipeline deal for gas, and the meat packing place JBS. And there's constantly things all the time. And normally we do focus on the message, right? This, like something that pops up on the screen, basically asking you for money, send a Bitcoin, call someone, do something, urgency. And then we're like, okay, let's deal with that, whatever it is. Maybe it's backups, maybe, I don't know what it is. But you go ahead and we take care of that. And then we think we're done. But really, we're not. I like to take the opportunity here to go ahead and actually look at all the steps while they're in, right? Before they got to the point of releasing that background to your computer and asking for money. Because I think sometimes you could potentially just know or prevent things. And a good example of that is this North Shore School District. There's some admins that experienced their own ransomware. So these folks, so if I open this up right here, these folks on that YouTube video, that goes right here. And I stopped it here at lesson 23. They had like 23 lessons they learned from having a ransomware attack. Super beneficial. North Shore, of course, is right up the road from UW Bothell. And they were so vulnerable in saying, hey, this happened to us. And these are all the pain points. And these are all the lessons. Like, I don't find this very often. So for you admins out there, super useful, even managers, super useful to check out, everything they had to go through and their thoughts around it. Really cool stuff. So back to the current slide, though. So yeah, all the steps. So like, for instance, these North Shore School District people, they told a story in there, and you'll see if you check out YouTube. Basically, it went from, okay, their digital forensic team saw that group one installed this malware, Emotet, that basically grabs credentials and passwords and stuff. They, who knows, sold it to group two. Group two came in, put their own malware in, did their own malware bad things. They left. They said, oh, let's sell it, whatever, to group three. Group three is like, well, I want money. I'm going to do ransomware. So they have this thing called Raikou, it's a ransomware. And then they let it loose and they asked for money from North Shore. But however, each one of these groups and each one of these malwares, they actually did something while they were there. But what did they do, right? So let's really look at the steps while they're in. And this is super important. And so this looks really like frightening and ransomware and like, oh my gosh, what do we do? I just want to remind everybody at the CISO's office at U of IT, we do have this page at the bottom there, /report, that you can go ahead and you can look at, and it has a first response checklist, has a response guide. You can just send us an email and we'll go ahead and answer other in-depth questions. There's also a privacy report to report privacy related things. I'd be remiss if I didn't add that here as well. So yeah, if a big something happens, please know you are supported. So let's go into my bad things. So specifically this icon is Atomic Red Team. And what that is it's basically a GitHub, which is a code repo place where you keep all your attacks, I guess, for an attacker or a red team or a nation state or bad person, bad thing. They have this repo I created, and I'm numbering them 1, 2, 3, whatever, a whole bunch of things. They went ahead and put it in there like, oh yeah, that's what people do. We'll add it so that we can have people know about this, and they can test these things and they can figure out if a bad thing's happening. So I put numbers behind here because that's kind of how it works. So you can think of Red Canary as automation. And what's cool about automation with Red Canary is instead of me having to do all my research and like know what the attacker is doing on the keyboard and actually having the exact commands laid out to do them, what they do here is they automate that. They're like, okay, here's all the commands. We'll put it into this number, into this automation framework. And all you need to know really is that this number does, like, for instance, it kills the event log service, which all logging on a Windows system, it kills. And so you just have to know that and like a few other things that go along with it. And boom, you've done it. You don't have to know exactly what it is. It knows it for you. Super cool. So like, for an example, here, let's visually look at it. So I'm going to click into one of them. Here it is. Here's that number. And it'll tell you a description. Hey, this is about default accounts. Specifically, the first test here is for enabling a guest account on your system. And so usually guest accounts are disabled. You don't want a guest account on your Windows machine. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to give it RDP access because I want to get to the box remotely. So I gave it that. Then I'm like, I want administrative access. So I gave it administrative access. So I had to do some research though. I had to know these things. And so there's actually a section here called commands. And so I actually know these very specific commands to do these very specific things. So yeah, so that's how that kind of ties back to this. And we'll go into that deeper here in my slideshow. So I did a bunch of stuff, and that's what the GitHub looks like. You just saw it. But here is kind of where that number came from. So that number came from this piece. So this is what they call the MITRE attack framework, the matrix. And they have it for Mac, Linux, Windows. We're just looking at Windows. And so specifically here, though, they have like columns, right? And these are basically approaches. Like if I'm going to approach a recon, like gathering information, I'm going to do what they call these techniques. Down here, it says there's 10 of them. And so if I click on here, well, this is a better example. So if I go over to this row, initial access, so like, how do I get into a system? If I go down and I go where it shows here, default accounts, and I click into it, then it's like, okay, this is how you get in. This is what a default account is. For instance, default accounts are those that are built into the OS, such as the guest system, like I just mentioned, and it gives you the ID right there. So that's how they kind of categorize these things. And so Atomic Red Team was like, well, let's automate that, and we'll just use those numbers. So that's where the numbers came from in this matrix. And so you could think of this whole matrix thing kind of like an encyclopedia. It's really this huge encyclopedia of low-hanging fruit that adversaries use. These techniques, these things on the command line that they actually use on computers. And so this MITRE attack matrix actually is like, hey, here's, tells you all about it, pretty much like an encyclopedia. So with that, let's actually go into a test, or let's go into a demo. So this is my Hyper-V machine. that I have. It's a test environment with Windows 10 on it. And this is the event viewer, which kind of shows all a bunch of logs. Like all these folders are all logs. And so I'm going to play this and kind of walk through the log. So here I'm just showing that, hey, I cleared the event 11.102 for the security one, just so that there's only that there. So when I do the test, you can see like, oh crap, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So in here I show that, oh yeah, I cleared the operational logs, I cleared the PowerShell. It's interesting that they put in a different log that I cleared logs. But anyways, so if you can scroll down, there's PowerShell. So PowerShell has two areas where they log. I'm showing that, hey, look, nothing in the logs. I'm not trying to play any tricks. You're just, I cleared them already. Let's go to the sysmon log, only one in there, and not a big deal. I always refresh because Windows is weird and like things can populate, and if you don't refresh, you won't see it. So, and then there's the second PowerShell. So I looked in there, yep, I already cleared it. It looks cleared. Okay, so no funny business going on. So let's actually do the attack. So this was extra stuff. Let me clear this off of here. I was just practicing. And so I'll have links to this video so you can see and make it bigger in the slides when they're distributed. So basically, here's the automation command. It's like invoke atomic test, then that number I talked about, and then some things at the end. Basically, I'm doing winrm to a machine, and then I say, hey, show me some details. So then it says, hey, these are all the different attacks you can do. 1, 2, 3. And so I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, well, I don't want to do that one. I don't want to clear logs. Let me try this other one. I'm like, oh, wrong number. Okay, I think it's .001. Look, there it is. Yep, cool. I could have went to the MITRE attack thing and looked, or I could have went to Atomic Red Team's Git repo and looked, but anyways, you can do this too. And so basically this is that enable guest account. And I say, hey, test number 1. I want to do the first one. And I'm double checking. It's like, oh, yep, there it is. Enable guest account. And so yeah, show detail brief, super cool. Just kind of tells me the overview of things. Doesn't do anything, just tells me the overview. And then I can go ahead and I can prompt for input is one option. Maybe the guest count was named something else like Bob. I could also check for prereqs. So maybe and this doesn't need a prereq, and ignore the errors. So you can check for prereqs if it needs it, and it's like outside of the operating system, there's another command where it'll get prereqs and it'll bring it in so that you can run the command. This has to do with like stuff that's not on the remote machine. It's on this machine, that's why. So there's the check prereqs, just in case you don't have the reqs, but there's also get prereqs right here. And so you can get it. And then lastly, awesomely, is the cleanup command. So the cleanup command is super cool because you can run the test and then you can clean yourself up. That's what's great about running these tests. So I just actually showed like what's like the details of it, not a brief details, but the details. And so you can see like, hey, what's really happening here? What are the attack commands? And it shows in here, hey, this is the command, turn on the guest user. Yes, please do that. Give it that password 1, 2, 3, bang. Put it in the administrators group right there. Oh boy. Right. So these are all things I do, by the way, at like CCDC as a red teamer. I'll go into their boxes and I'll do this exact thing. And they're not even looking for the guest account. I'm just like, yes, thank you. So good. And so, yeah. And so you could take those commands individually if you wanted to and not use the automation and just paste it in and be like, oh, am I detecting that? You can do that too. So let me change screens here. Let me open up a new PowerShell command. You typically have to run these things as administrator. So this is on the other machine. It says client 1, and I'm doing like, what's in the administrator group? And so administrator, yep, cool. Domain admin, yep, makes sense, but no guest, right? Cool. Again, nothing up my sleeve, no funny business. And we'll go ahead and do the automation where it will add that guest account. We'll check later. So again, I'm looking, oh, yep, there's some PowerShell logs. Looking through here, like it's a bunch of gibberish. It's like, this means nothing to me. It won't mean anything to your admins. And yeah, so there's a lot of bad like stuff in these logs that don't mean much. Although you can see right here that I ran that local group administrator command via sysmon. So if you look in there, oh, wow, there it shows what's on the command line. So that's really important with sysmon. And then if I look in this PowerShell log, I'm like, okay, does it show me that I did that thing in PowerShell? No, it doesn't. Okay, great. Let's look in security log. Does it show? Account was logged off. No, it didn't show that I'm looking in the administrator group. That might be it. It looks like it said something, but it doesn't show me what's on the command line, like what actually is happening, unfortunately. Yeah, that one will show like client 2 at least. It's showing that's my attacker machine. It's like, oh yeah, it's trying to do something, but what, right? Where if you looked on the sysmon logs, it would have showed you some more. So let's go ahead and move forward. Let's kind of get out of client 1 logs and get into client 2. So this is the attacker machine that I have the automation that all the attacking stuff is on, and then I can just put like one attack at a time onto the client box or whatever box it is. So let's clear this up and run it. Okay, so yeah, so it ran the test number 1. So let's go over to the client. So we're going to check out the logs. Let's refresh, make sure that everything's up. Oh, yep, updated some stuff. Let's look. Okay, enabled local group. So I enabled the administrator group with guest. It looks like there. Oh wait, no, it's a remote desktop. So that's me adding that remote RDP, the remote desktop thing. That's cool. Built-in administrator group, so I add myself to that. So it's showing me some good things in the security log, right? Reset the password. I did the password of 123, right? Although it's not giving me the values here, I don't see that. It kind of says, hey, some things are happening, but it's not giving you a lot of context, unfortunately. So let's look around at sysmon. So sysmon is something I installed, and you don't necessarily have to have sysmon to have command line auditing. You can turn that on in a different way. We could talk about that later, or you can send an email to the CISO's office. We could talk about that in depth. So I'm looking in PowerShell. Look at that, PowerShell refresh. Only 3 things in the log. Wow. So like I used PowerShell to do things and it didn't record anything. It's crazy. All right. So going into sysmon, let's look. Okay, scheduled tasks. That's not quite what I wanted. Let me refresh this. Let's look. Scheduled tasks. Don't want that one. Scheduled tasks. I'm not looking for scheduled tasks. So there's other things happening on the system with scheduled tasks that the system just does. So I'm just kind of fast forwarding past all those things. Let's see here. We're getting close to server creation or service creation. Here we go. Windows remote management. So it actually knows from client 2, from my attacker box, that I remoted in to the client 1 right there. It says client 1. So that's pretty useful with like the time and like what IP address, a lot of good information, more context than what we typically get. So if I keep scrolling through, maybe I'll find like the actual commands, right? Well, we will find it. It's just a matter of going through. For instance, here it is, modify the registry. So here it shows that I added this to the registry. Basically, these are, looks like they're connections, so that can allow a connection to the RDP terminal server. So that's cool. However, if you go down, way down, it's like, hey, look at all these. This is the parent command. This is what actually ran to eventually run that other thing. So this is like, oh, there it is. There's the guest account. Yes, there's that password. There's the adding to, I mean, it's like, wow, it's so much context compared to what the normal Windows logging is. So if admins are like, oh yeah, we're logging, it's like, are you logging? Are you logging the right things? Are you logging like verbose things? So, yeah, so sysmon really comes into play. So here's PowerShell. Looking through PowerShell, I'm like, can't really see too much. Like it's not very verbose, unfortunately. So what this is all saying is default logging on Windows is missing a lot of things. They're not detecting a lot of things. So finding the steps of the adversary while they're in your network before they give you ransomware is less likely with default logging. It's more likely though if you have sysmon logging or some other logging we can go into at a later time. So here I am on the client machine. I ran that net group manually and there it is. There's the guest. It's like, guest, cool. So it did work, great. I could look at all the other things, but I'm not going to. And then I'm going to run the cleanup command. So just to show that the cleanup command does run, right? I'm running it, and then we'll go ahead and we will go to the machine and do that command manually again. And there we don't have guest. So sweet, awesome. So that is it cleaned up. So you can do the test, and then you can clean up after yourself. You don't have to leave the vulnerability exploit on the machine. And where this really comes handy is if you have a gold image and you're like, okay, I want all my images to look like that. That's what ideally you'd want, to run this stuff against. Maybe not your whole infrastructure. Yeah, so let's see what more I have in tail for this video. It's paused a bit. I'm gonna fast forward. So I went through all these things already. So we're going from 78 to 70 now. So this will be covering your tracks. So I ran a command. Yeah. So you didn't really see it. I didn't really say it as. So let me pause it. So we're running a new command, 1070. So if we look it up, 1070.001. So like if I go to like Red Canary and I say, clear logs, go, and then there's that 1071. I'm like, oh, okay, so that clears logs. Great. Clears Windows logs. Great. So test one does that. Cool. So neat. And then that's when I would run my automation. So let's go down to, please hold, back here. And so that's how I ran that on it. I ran it right here. So 1071, do test number one, which was clear logs. Let's run it against the machine. And then I basically go to the event viewer and I say, let's look, did I clear it? Yep, I cleared it. So that's covering your tracks. So I'm actually going to jump out of this so that we have more time to do other things. But these are some steps that can be done as ransomware goes through your network. So let me move forward here to the next screen. All right, so what does this mean? I've kind of been saying it all through it. Without detection, well, Windows default logging is not detection. If you don't have detections, then most likely you don't have responding. And so like in the case of the North Shore ransomware, if they couldn't detect the group 1, group 2, eventually they had to, the detection was apparent because it's ransomware and they're just very, they show themselves. And then you had to respond. But if possibly detection was earlier, could have responded a little faster, I guess. But this is mostly to show, hey, without detection, there is no response. And that's not good. So there are real criminals doing this out there. I just wanted to show there was this latest Conti ransomware plan revealed, and they actually use admin commands. So no, like if you're thinking like Sophos it has this, Windows Defender has this is like taken care of. It's like, well, they're not gonna like stop regular like Windows type commands and administration. That's gonna hinder admins. They're just not gonna do it. So this is just showing that this is from a Russian actor. You can see the Russian stuff in there, but basically they're just using stuff that are built into the system. So that wouldn't necessarily be alerted on, that it just bypasses alerting. So this is just an example of that. And this leads me into, hey, we have our policies. In our policies, we do have our controls and operations. Amongst that, we do have a range of other resources that are at hand. But more specifically, since we're talking about detection, we're talking about monitoring and what isn't there and is there, I wanted to highlight, number 6, there's this monitoring control. So we do have, a policy saying, hey, we should do some logging, do some detection, and do it on critical systems, right? Maybe not all systems, maybe just the ones that have PHI or PII or student records or PCI or, critical systems that may need this. And that could be your SCCM machine, patching machines, update machines, those kinds of things. as well. So let me see on time. Cool. So we're doing good on time. And I wanted to go through this scenario here. So let's start detecting bad things, right? Do you, even if you did detect things, do we have procedures? And so I like to bring up, there's this card game out there by a group, and it makes kind of things fun, like Go Fish or, Uno or whatever the game you play as a card game, war or whatever. It kind of gamifies things. I found it really, really interesting that it helped me really think about the steps and how to have procedures for the different steps before something happens bad. So like, it's like, there's these procedure cards. Let me back it up though. So before that, there's these other cards. There's like, I'll go through each one. So initial compromise, this card would be like back to that miter attack thing where there's initial compromise. It could be any one of those things. So it gives you a card. It says, hey, maybe there was like someone knew your password. Maybe it was winter 2020. Please don't have winter 2020 or any season, and some numbers and like a bang or hash sign, because hackers know that, by the way, down here. Please change that if you have that. But back to the card. So initial compromise could be a password reuse. So you'll pull that out and be like, okay, so what do we have for that? Do we have a procedure for that? Do we test that? Do we, monitor for that? Do we go to have I been pwned and see if a password's been used somewhere else? And then we can go into the next, step in the process. So it's like they say pivot and escalate. So basically it means going from one machine to another machine or service or system or something. And so it can say, hey, do you have a way to detect if someone did like my red canary thing? Do you have something that will see that person winning RMing to somewhere? And so where's that procedure, right? How would you go about doing that? And then, there's another card, persistence. So like a persistence would be back at when I made that account for the guest, right? I enabled it, I gave it a new password. That is my persistence. I can keep coming to that box when I'm doing CCDC on that team over and over and over, because they don't look for guest accounts being enabled and they don't have any logging on that. And so that's my persistence. I can always come back to that. It's super cool. And with that, if I'm in there, I can do the next card, which is called C2 exfil. So basically I can implant some malware to where I can just, zip it up or download or what have you, the thing to go ahead and get the data. So it's like we play that card, like, okay, well, where's the procedure for that? Do we have a procedure if that happens, or to prevent that, or to mitigate that, or reasons why the risk of that is low or high, right? And just really kind of talk about the things. I'm going to add this URL here. This URL is pretty sweet. It makes this game attainable by anybody. So you could go to this right now, set up an account, and you can play this game today. Super cool. So let's start the conversation, right? Let's start the conversation of what happens in your network before the ransomware. Okay, yeah, there's this last card I forgot to mention. It's called injects. So you can basically make the inject anything you want. Like I put that ransomware thing on there. So basically I can throw that card down, like the last thing, go, okay, yep, you got all these procedures for when, passwords are tried a whole bunch of times, you lock them out. Or you have a procedure of when someone, remotes in, you don't let that happen. Or you use two-factor authentication. Okay, well, what about ransomware? Do you have, incident response for that? Do you report that? Right? You can kind of work through that conversation with these injects. And the injects can be anything. You can just make up something that maybe you want to improve in your place. So please do use injects. I'm gonna go ahead and actually pause this out and leave a lot of time for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jesse. Yeah, so far we haven't gotten any questions in the chat, but please, anyone who'd like to ask a question right now, feel free to enter it into the chat, and that way we can share it out. You can also raise your hand if chat isn't available for you, and I can unmute you. You can ask your question there using the raise hand option in the Zoom dash.
And while we wait, we could also run a poll if people want to do a poll. So like if I open up this in a private browser, we'll see what everyone else sees. Oh, a page not found. Well, that's not cool. So if I put this in chat, does anybody else see this?
I think I've just dropped the link to the poll in the chat if people would like to participate. It's working for me.
It is working for you.
Mhm.
Sweet. So yeah, so like detecting bad things, what are other scams out there that other people have experienced? I'm curious to hear what other people's experience have been, kind of like my grandparents, how they had a scammer went ahead and compromised their email account and went ahead and sent it to all their friends and got Amazon gift cards from them. I'm curious other people had that. Ah, here it is, enter scam. So like IRS, right? Oh, okay, deduction. Oh, is that deduction from payroll? Yikes. Yeah, that wouldn't be fun.
And I'm seeing Scott has mentioned that there's a great scam that almost got me. Scott, if you want, I can unmute you and you can tell us that story. All right, hold on. Let me get into the right part of my participant list. Just a sec.
Hi, this is a great one here. The TSA PreCheck, do you ever, for flying?
Yeah.
So when you go to TSA PreCheck, it's a government site, but there's lots of them like this one right here on the check. It looks like it's PreCheck. It has the same data, same screens, and unfortunately you can put every single piece of personal information you have in there and get all the way through to the end, and they come in and they say, oh, it's this extra fee, and you're like, wait, what? And then, but you've already given them everything, and it's not .gov. So there's sites out there that look real and they're grabbing information, and unless you pay attention to what you're actually doing, they get you. Thanks.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I was not aware. Oh, that's so cool. It actually reminds me of, have people heard of the moving truck scam? I was told that, I think it was a police report in Bothell that there was a moving truck scam where kind of a fake moving truck company will be like, hey, yeah, I'll move all your stuff out of your home to another home. And they actually would take all the stuff, put it in the moving truck, and then they would take off and then call them back saying, well, if you want your stuff back, you need to give us this amount of money, almost like a ransom for their stuff. It's not good. So yeah, just like you, Scott, we need to vet things, right? We need to vet things. Cool.
Yeah.
Email phishing, I see here. Payroll. Yes. Cool, so I'll just let this go for 60 more seconds or so.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, we have a question from Richard. Is there a place where these security checks for both logging, etc., you're running, so in PowerShell, are consolidated so I can see them and potentially run them?
So I don't know if I understand that exactly. So
Yeah, feel free to read the question in the chat. Apologies for not repeating it with great intonation.
oh no, it's a technical thing, right? So it's like, oh gosh, there's so much stuff on it. So like it says place, okay. Is there a place where these security checks, verbose logging, you're running in PowerShell are consolidated so you can see them and potentially run them? See them and run them. Security checks. I'm not sure I understand that, Richard. Maybe that's something we can talk about on the side, or if you want to open up your mic, we could talk about it.
Yeah, give me just a sec.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you were running some PowerShell commands there to, the main thing was that you said you had a Git repo with some of this stuff, and you're running better logging than Windows standard logging. Is there somewhere I could see, like, do you have a cheat sheet for, these are Linux commands, I guess, or PowerShell? Is there somewhere I could see this so I could try doing some of that logging on my own computer?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a whole workshop on this that I bring people through, and I have a lot of supporting documentation on that. I can absolutely point you to that area so that you can have the documentation and go through it and all the commands.
Great.
Yeah. So Richard, if you could put your email in the chat, I will email you.
Yeah. And if you want, you're welcome to email or to message. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Randy, thank you for sharing that the example of a Venmo scam where people pretend to take your picture but send money to their account. That sounds horrifying.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Venmo. Yeah, I can't even imagine with all the cash apps out there. Things going on. Oh, actually, that reminds me. There's that other one, right? It's for Craigslist or OfferUp. People basically are like, yeah, I'm selling a thing. And the other people are like, yeah, I'll buy the thing. I'll use Venmo. Here's their money. Thanks for your thing. And then when they leave with their thing, they're like, cancel the Venmo account, cancel the Venmo payment. And so they basically have taken the thing and the cash. It's almost like that back in the day where you could like pay for something with a credit card, and then you could get the goods, and then you can be like, nope, stop payment, reverse payment at your bank to get the money back. Yeah, eek.
Ugh. Well, thank you to everyone for sharing sharing your examples. Yeah, and I see Jesse, you're flipping to the last page. I'm going to drop some information in the chat again for people who'd like to complete our survey at the end of this. We really appreciate your feedback on our sessions and on the program. Jesse, any last note that you'd like to end on?
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming out, and please, please, please do send an email to the CISO's office or help with any other questions. I'm happy to help out. Again, this is my passion. This is what I do after work. So I'm happy to talk about all these things and better protect your data and the university as a whole. So please, yeah, do reach out.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. That marks the end of our session. We'll be sticking around for a few minutes, join me in thanking Jesse for this wonderful presentation today, using reactions or whatever you prefer. Ooh, lots of lovely reactions and emoji coming through the chat.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.